What's going on, y'all? My name is Tommy. Welcome back to the channel. Time for another episode of Min-Maxing for Fun and Profit. Today, we've talked about sacred geometry and the mechanics therein. We've talked about siege engines and the mechanics therein. Now let's put them all together on a character, shall we? If you're liking what you're seeing, remember to like, subscribe, ding the bell. Stay caught up on all your stuff. For now, let's dive in. Okie doke, so this build requires a lot of buy-in in terms of mechanical knowledge about very esoteric things. Follow this card right up here for sacred geometry and arithmancy, because everyone loves doing math so much. Well, you're playing first edition Pathfinder, I assume you do. Why not do even more? And follow this card up here for the basics of siege engines. Down to business today, we'll be playing a Gonzi. I know, right? Our siege mage is going to be a race with an intelligence neg. Wild. We're choosing it much as we did for our dimensional dervish build. God, follow this card. We're really racking them up. For the weapon play alternate racial trait to be descended from the Valkyries, to be treated as a fighter for things, but more importantly, to get martial weapon proficiency, because today we will be playing 10 levels of wizard, specifically the siege mage, and all 10 levels of the eldritch knight. Taking 10 levels of eldritch knight causes us to drop 1 level of our total caster level, but in return we get a couple combat feats, in return we get some fightery things. More importantly, in return we get 9 levels worth of our wizard casting stats with 10 points of base attack, because this wizard wants to make attack actions generally with things like ballista or cannons. We also need higher base attack for feats and things, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. For our traits today, reactionary as always, you knew you'd see it, but more importantly, I think for the first time, we see a very good mechanical reason to take this trait at your table: rich parents. This feat starts you off with 900 gold to play with, which usually doesn't have a lot of payoff for characters in the long run because you'll get loot and things, but bear in mind, a light ballista will set you back 500 gold. Each ballista bolt costs 10 gold, and you don't want to have to wait until someone invests in you or you raid an abandoned insert dungeon here to be able to do the thing you want to do. For our stat priority, dexterity first and foremost. Again, this wizard wants to shoot things, followed by your intelligence. It's your casting stat. Less important for us, but we don't want to shirk on it. Some of our spells will have DCs, and we want extra spells to burn to fuel the siege engine. Con and whiz so you don't die or shoot your friend with the ballista. Dump your charisma, dump your strength. Our siege mage has 3 opposition schools. Today we will be choosing illusion, enchantment, and hot take, necromancy. There are a lot of wild things a siege mage can get up to using animate dead, and for a while that was the build. That was, we were gonna build some giant hulking zombie ogre thing with a cannon built into its arm that you would ride on and shoot out of, but A, I think those are less viable at the average table, and B, we frankly have enough shit going on as it is. Evocation will do us good a lot in the early game as well when we're just straight up out of ballista bolts, or sometimes you might just need to fireball a dude, or a bunch of dudes all together. It happens. Ultimately, the reason I decided to build this build the way I built it was because sacred geometry and arithmancy almost always want to be cast on spells we are casting at the beginning of the day, so you can do your math or calculate the letters, so you're not trying to crunch a bunch of math in the literal middle of combat. Most of the time we want extended tenacious unseen servants, or unseen servants with greater caster level, or even things like mage armor, shrink object. As always, because I believe feat taxes are incredibly dumb, we will be using Dragon in the Room, my modified elephant in the room rule set. Follow this card right up here. I think that's literally all the cards in the first 6 minutes of recording. Nice. Sacred geometry at level 1. I just said feat taxes were dumb. This is a feat tax. We'll be choosing extend spell and tenacious spell. Extend spell, of course, doubles the durations of spells we cast. Tenacious spell for +1 spell level. We increase the DC of caster level checks to counter or dispel spells by 2. Should, more importantly, a tenacious spell get dispelled or dismissed, it lasts for an additional 1d4 rounds before ending. This doesn't happen if you walked into an anti-magic field, but it does give you time to notice that your unseen servants are faltering a little bit, so you can recast them so your loop continues. It's really important for us. A fireball will also shut us off, but honestly, I feel like if they're throwing fireballs at you, you got bigger problems. And we can solve those a little easier with even something just like, if we get the sense the artillery will be returning fire, cast a wall of force overhead so the fireball hits that and not the broadside of our face. We get Siege Engineer, again, as we talked about in that card you followed at first level from being a Siege Mage. At level 3, we will take Extend Spell. At level 5, we will take Tenacious Spell as our bonus feat from being a wizard. And with our standard feat, we'll take Spell Focus Divination, and then at level 7, this is where we'll take Arithmancy. By this point, I feel like it's a reasonable presumption that you have enough spellcraft ranks to make sure you can reliably make your checks. And comboing that with Extend Spell means you're casting a spell that lasts oftentimes hours per level at +1 caster level, which then basically becomes +2 hours more on top of the long duration. Seems real good. I often house rule these down. We might make a video about that, honestly, at some point when I'm doing 1E things. But this build wants to take them. Next, we will take Craft Wondrous Item and Craft Magic Arms and Armor. This allows us to spend our downtime, a very cheap amount of gold, and a spellcraft check, again, that we basically can't fail, to churn out the party's items as well as craft construct. There are so many bonkers things you can get up to when using Craft Construct specifically to make animated objects to make our siege engines be able to move around, that, friends, I'm going to leave this one 100% up to you. If you would like the thing you made to be able to roll over people and also shoot at them, yeah, sure, go for it. Make that happen. Mostly, we want to take this to make sure our siege engine has the ability to move itself. So we don't have to worry about unseen servants pushing it should it get dispelled. And more importantly, so we don't have to babysit it or push it ourselves. Though there's probably an alternate universe where someone who didn't drop enchantment just dominates some large creature to do it for you. Alongside it, we'll be taking Vital Strike. Wild, right? A Vital Strike wizard? What even is this? Well, I'll tell you what it is. It's a big fuck-off cannon. Specifically, the main thing we want to get our hands on in terms of doing damage is the Fiend's Mouth Cannon. If you're playing on Galarian, this should be arbitrarily easy to do. Firearms are spread out far enough that you should be able to find one, and if not, you're able to teleport at this point. Run to Alkenstar, steal one, run back. A Fiend's Mouth Cannon does 8d6 points of damage, so that means, God, by level 11, we're sitting at 16d6 on the end of a dire boomstick. We will eventually get up to Improved Vital Strike, meaning our standard action to fire this thing does 24d6 points of damage to, you know, whatever happens to be in the way, just blow it away. Master Siege Engineer, which has a prerequisite that I assume must be Siege Engineer and be mistyped. This allows us to, if you are a crew lead on a siege engine, bet you are, your crew can use move actions to load a siege engine. When you spend actions to aim a siege engine, you and your crew can use move actions instead of full round actions. I think this becomes arbitrary because the amount of unseen servants you can jam out to burn full round actions to do the very simple repetitive task over and over of reloading siege equipment should make this pretty arbitrary, but in a world where you have to control your siege engine by virtue of its link, this will make it a little faster. From there, honestly, our feats kind of get a little on the simple side. Much simpler than you would expect for a build this wild. Quicken Spell, because of course we will, because we want to cast things with swift actions, alongside Devastating Strike for only a maximum of +6. It does cap, but I mean, in a world where we're not adding our mod to damage, seems good to me. Good old elephant in the room lets us apply that to every siege engine. We'll get Improved Vital Strike at level 16. Then Weapon Specialization, again choosing siege weapons, which should auto up to greater. And Improved Initiative, because say it with me kids, if you made it this far, why not? Next up for our key magic items, of which really there are so few, follow this card right up here for the big 6, you of course want them. A lot of the key things we want are just not magical at all. Ring gates, obviously, at the end of the day for cannon shenanigans, but alongside that, a pair of mundane items go a long way for us. First, a gallery. Basically a movable wall to block like arrows and things as troops would advance on the walls. Remember, we can move siege engines by the power of our mental link with them. This might not have a gun on it, but a siege engine it is. They are arbitrarily cheap by the time we can like shrink object this, throw it out on the battlefield, then make it bigger to cover. It's a cheap wall spell without having to burn magic, and secondly, a howdah. It's the thing that troops rode upon when they rode on elephants and stuff. You need a huge creature to tie it to. This is specifically for the groups that have druids or hunters or polymorphing druids or what have you. A howdah can carry 4 medium creatures or 2 medium creatures and a light ballista or light catapult, which means we can't hook up the mega cannon, which is probably for the best for the back of the creature that would hypothetically be carrying it. The glorious thing about this kind of build is it's totally valid to blow a bunch of your money on a lot of siege engines. Matter of fact, in a lot of universes, it makes a lot of sense to just buy multiple cannons, have multiple unseen servants burning all of your low-level spell slots to do so, via pearls and power and such, to just keep them loaded so you can just dance along the battery firing as you go. Before we go into the math and things, a couple of spells we didn't talk about when we were talking about the Siege Mage for further shenanigans, just in case you didn't have enough shenanigans, starting with Named Bullet. Named Bullet targets 1 piece of ammunition or 1 thrown weapon or 1 cannonball, which has come out reloaded over the course of several Unseen Servants full round actions, and then fired only to respawn again. When casting this spell, you imbue magic a la the favorite enemy, whether that be a literal specific creature or a type and subtype. When you use Named Bullet ammo, the ammunition never misfires, it's unaffected by concealment, and at a range of 30 feet or less, it targets touch. Honestly, I feel like giant things should anyway. When the target hits the selected creature, you have to overcome SR, or the spell has no effect. Any normal hit is considered a critical threat. For the low cost of a level 4 spell, 32d6 plus 16d6 or 48d6 hucked at the nearest bad thing. On average, that's 168 points of damage, then 6 more from Devastating Strike, then 16 multiplying weapon specialization and its greater variant. Then of course you cast Greater Magic Weapon for 20 more from the enchantment. And how, oh how could we forget Empower Siege Engine? Why not before spending our standard action to obliterate someone? Why not expend a 9th level spell slot for a casual +9 to our attack roll before some like contingency true strike shenanigans for 3 times 9 for +27 to damage? In total, that shakes out to an average of 336 points of damage, which won't one-shot any of the high-level threats of Pathfinder, which means it's actually probably balanced for a high-level play. Fucking wild. Next up, Energy Siege Shot. For our purposes, specifically the greater variant to make sure it can target the big heckin' cannon. It transmutes what you're shooting into energy as opposed to literal ball. There are also extra effects on top of it. If we choose Acid, the ammunition does half its damage in splash to all creatures and unattended objects within 15 feet of the target. Creatures can halve it with a reflex save at spell DC. Cold creates an ice sheen within a 20-foot radius burst around the target, which lasts for 1d6 rounds and entangles targets. If you start in the ice sheen, you take a little cold damage, so you can crawl through that while you're freezing to death. God, that sucks. Electricity staggers things hit by the siege engine attack or within 15 feet of the attack. Just a big stagger bomb. Terrifying and horrible. Fire might set things on fire, meh. Sonic will deafen things for an hour. Force will hit ghosts. I'm sure we can see all of the modality there that the wizard often loves, especially again in a world where we have multiple siege engines behind us, where we can be like, I'm gonna stagger you, I'm gonna entangle you, and then just start peeling out damage. Then lastly, a port object. For a standard action, this allows us to immediately send an object held in our hands to a nearby location. We'll almost always be using this for the sending variant to take a shrunken siege equipment and move it somewhere to rapidly deploy it, particularly our galleries. I need this to go here. I don't want to go there. I would like it to get very big and block up a door or just protect the fighter's flank. So by the time we have Sacred Geometry, Extend Spell, Tenacious Spell, and Arithmancy, we are a level 7 wizard. The modified spell level of a Tenacious Extended Unseen Servant is 3. At a spell level effectively of 3rd, we are shooting for 19, 23, 29. Our friendly neighborhood calculator in the first go finds 29 after 15 guesses, then a 29 in 4 guesses, then a 29 in 76 guesses. Proving, as it was so well said in my Discord, in fact, Sacred Geometry is a weird favored class bonus with a steep upside. To go even further, Unseen Servant's digital root is 6, which means at the beginning of the day we spend a swift action, I'll assume what's worse for us, a DC 10 plus Tenacious Extended Unseen Servant equals 3 plus digital root is 6, a DC 19 spellcraft check. If you are allowed to take 10, you can clinch this by the time we have the feat, and if you are not allowed to take 10, as a level 7 wizard with presumed 7 ranks in spellcraft, a +3 from it being a class skill for us, and presuming we maxed out our intelligence with the neg at level 1, and have since got our hands on a headband of Very Smart +2. We have an intelligence of 18 with a modifier of 4, which means we need only roll a 5 and out the gate succeed 75% of the time. This is before allies with aid another, this is before guidance, this is before anything that could get your spellcraft even higher, and in 5 levels, we literally cannot fail. Did all that to say that by level 7, we will cast a level 3 spell using a level 1 spell slot. Said level 3 spell, at caster level technically 8, will last for a grand total of 16 hours or 2/3 of the day, which on the one hand feels like overkill, but on the other hand feels like if you're the one keeping watch, very, very important. And should the enemy wizard figure out what you're doing and dispel you, you have several rounds ahead of time to re-up. And this is before applying arithmancy to any of the other spells in our repertoire to increase damage dice, to increase durations on rounds or minutes. That either means a spell lasts for an extra 6 seconds or an extra 10 rounds, which in longer conflicts can be just essential. Eventually, this is extended wall of force without burning a high level spell slot. The last bit of fun secret tech, we're not talking about it, but before I go on to the next thing, it immediately dawns on me, a wall of force directly in front of something like a catapult to protect it from attackers from the front, letting you fire over top with no ill effects is hilarious, as is honestly your choice of pit spell in front of the siege engine to protect it from the army of infantry that wants to run at it. In the optimized party, follow this card right here. This is a striker, point, click, make it dead. Thinking about it though, we're not all min-maxing for fun and profit. God, sometimes we min-max just for fun. And a lot of the published first edition content, as a man who has been making these videos for several years can now confirm, is not made as written to contain a lot of the big, horrible, terrifying things. A good GM will balance, a good player will not lean too hard in. Communication and session zeros are key. But with that in mind, from now on in my min-maxing videos, I think I would like to add a little segment at the end for what adventure path this shines the most in. 3 to recommend for the Sacred Geometry Siege Mage. First, and probably easiest that comes to everyone's mind, is Skull and Shackles. Because in fact, those ships have cannons and ballista and things mounted on them. Not only does this give you a place to store all of your stuff and a reliable platform, further, if enemy ships also have siege engines, you, once you get a little closer, can spend your action economy to manually take control of their siege engines with your bond, cause them to fire into the air and miss wildly, or should, I don't know, one of the bad guys happen to try to reload the thing, and then you've held all your actions to reload it quickly and blow their brains out. Second, Rise of the Rune Lords, an adventure path both where you are regularly defending places or assaulting fortified areas, as well as an adventure path where a large portion of your enemies are size large at least. Probably works for Giant Slayer too, TBH. Having played through a large swath of Rune Lords and GM'd for a large swath of Rune Lords, can confirm there are plenty of rooms where you can set up, hallways where you may have to shrink object, and big battlefields with long ranges where you can fire downrange. A similar logic applies to Wrath of the Righteous. You spend a lot of that campaign on campaign, assaulting cities, hunting down high value and large targets. There are also several maps where there are literal siege engines drawn on the art, which, you can borrow, liberate, or otherwise put in your pocket for use. But that's all the time I have. Holy crap. That was a long one. What do y'all think? Have we played siege mages? Have we committed sieges in our tabletop role-playing games? Let me know. I'm so glad to finally have all these big over-the-top build things off my chest. God, they've been on the request line for years. What's coming next week? Who knows? Only one way to find out. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you next time.